and well, let's go with this thing.
Okay, great. So let's talk about why we're here. And I have three objectives for us. Number one is to know about the opportunities of when to batch cocktails, because if it's a need or because it's an opportunity, and we'll talk about those. And then some of the tips on how to batch, the pointers. The whole thing is to get you thinking and be comfortable with the idea, so when an opportunity presents itself, you're comfortable to jump on it. I've got a lot of material here. Relax, take notes. You can shoot me email afterward. My email address will appear again at the end. It's tablewizard1@gmail. You can also find me on Facebook. You know, so just relax and absorb. I know sometimes you say something and it triggers people to start thinking about somebody else, and we'll, time permits, we'll go over some questions at the end. So, why batch make large volumes of cocktails? Okay, there's a number of reasons. One is there's a large drink volume requirement. Some of these premieres, some of these events that I do at, they go, hey, we need 500 people. They need a certain cocktail. We have a sponsor. They want their bottle, their cocktail prominently shown. Consistency. Sometimes we have large bar establishments. It gets busy on a Friday, Saturday night, or whatever night of the week it is. And then suddenly people are making cocktails, even though there is a recipe. They start changing it around, and we lack the consistency. It's faster. We can expedite a delivery, particularly when logistics is an issue. Reduce the labor, the time to actually make cocktails, the ever over pouring and making a cocktail off. And of course, there's upsell opportunities. And I'll talk to you about those, particularly in events or special events in your bars. Now, as an example, the Golden Globes, Casamigos was a sponsor. And they wanted 450 cocktails using their tequila, which was the cocktail. And they wanted it delivered in 5 minutes. So we put the elements, the tools, the planning in place to accomplish that. And I'm going to share with you what many of those components are. As an example, this is an event where when 2,500 guests were let in, they wanted a welcome cocktail served to them. So we prepared it, chilled the glass, put the staff out, and away we go. In a bar, Friday night, you're slammed. You're having a special featured cocktail because you got a special on your liquor supplier, a holiday, it's a special day, it's somebody's birthday, whatever the occasion is. Right. So trade passing, this is something that I do a lot of, whether it's weddings, special events, and it's just a cocktail, like for example, a welcome cocktail or signature cocktail is prepared, and the staff goes out and serves it. Sometimes we're matching a cocktail with food. In the middle picture here, this has become very popular in the catering community around the country. We take a Patron bottle, empty out the Patron, make a margarita, put it back in the bottle, and then serve it with mini tacos. And the one on the right is, this was done for barbecue. This is rum and Coke. My only word of caution is make sure that the Coke bottles that have rum in them don't end up with kids. So, Hollywood premiere. This one is a very formal gathering. You can see the staff is all uniform, very consistently and dressed. They've got their stuff out. And then here's a wedding. It's self-serve. Are we having feedback? Get music.
I think people don't all have their microphones muted.
Okay. All right. So here's one, a divot stop. This is out at the Will Rogers. We need 1,100 champagne flutes. There's a time constraint because all these people are going to go out onto the field. They're going to push the divots back in. So logistics, the timing is a big issue, and of course, keeping the champagne cold. All right. So how do we accomplish this? One of my favorite ways to get and serve large volumes of cocktails is to borrow, we call lateral thinking, for how we serve beer. So we use a jockey box. If you're not familiar with a jockey box, I've included a couple pictures here. You'll see in the center picture that internally there are coils. And whenever you buy or rent jockey boxes, if you can, make sure that you get the 120-foot coils. That gives you lots of time to chill the product, so you don't have to worry about chilling your kegs. You'll find there's also our CO2 tank. They're now making them in smaller sizes, so you don't always have to use, a large container, you can go to smaller batches. One of the newest things I see coming out is the quick tap over there on the far right, where you just add a CO2 and a tap to the keg, and away you go. If you're not familiar with the Cornelius keg, this is a keg that has a top where you can open, so we can batch up our cocktails, and we'll get into that in a minute. Pour them in, and then hook them up into the system, and you can just pour the cocktail right from the tap. A caution on this, make sure that you stir your cocktails or shake your kegs from time to time, because spirits have different weights, particularly when there's mixes and syrups and components added in, and they will stratify, so you got to shake that keg up from time to time, or add a circulation pump. That's kind of like beyond what we're going to do today. So, all right. Now, batching cocktails also covers warm beverages or hot beverages, particularly now we're going into the fall season. And the traditional thing that people would do is to use a coffee urn, traditional one. You notice that the can of canned fuel or sterno is underneath. And the problem with this is that it burns, it gets too hot. So here's my replacement solution. It's my MacGyvering. There's a product that's called lava gel or heat. It's a packet. You smash the packet, and I replace the can and put the packet so it touches the bottom. This will keep hot at about 200 degrees for 3 hours. So we don't have that burning sensation taking place. Another way to go is to batch our cocktails and hold them in. This is a Beverage insulated container. It's made by Cambro in Huntington Beach. Carlisle's another company. They come in like 5 gallon and 11 gallons. Now over on the right-hand side is a flameless coffee urn. These suckers are expensive, but again, they're really nice. You preheat the container and it'll hold the cocktail, your cider, hot chocolate.
Roy, you got muted. We seems that Roy has gotten muted, so we do apologize and thank you for your patience on this. We'll get this figured out in just 1 second. We're both texting him as I speak.
I'm trying to unmute him myself.
Okay, how does that work?
Okay, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, so can you tell me where I lost you?
You were talking about the flameless coffee urn. You were saying they are a little expensive, and then you're about to give what it can do.
Oh, okay. You preheat the container and it will hold temperature. Regardless of what you use, if you're sharing coffee or making tea in it, make sure that you use a coffee pot cleaner or TSP to get those oils out. Otherwise, the cocktail or whatever you're serving hot is going to have those oils in it. Now, word of caution, people oftentimes will grab one of these Igloo coolers, and I put the do not use sign through it because these containers were designed for cold. The physics, the design is for cold, not for hot. And I've heard these horror stories and lawsuits of people putting boiling liquids in them, and then the plastics leach out, or it gets knocked over and somebody gets burned, or they get scalded even, and then the lawsuits happen, and then Igloo stands up and says, we put these warnings on, it says not for hot use, so spare yourself that problem. Just use good containers. Okay, now sometimes we're just doing a punch bowl and we need to make a large volume and the guests are going to serve themselves, particularly at holidays. And sometimes we might use a drink dispenser that we're going to set up on the bar and feature this cocktail, or it might be for the guests to do self-serve. The important thing to note here with the Arrow is that you don't want to put too much ice in, and so these have a way to isolate the ice from the cocktail itself so that we don't over dilute it. So we'll talk about dilution more in a minute. Okay, another way of serving is to use clear bottles with stoppers. This allows for better portion control. Sometimes in volume situations, I like to use the 750 or 1 liter clear wine bottles. If I'm pouring in volume, then I'll use the spill, stop, pour. I use the bigger 220 because I'm just pouring for volume. I don't have to worry so much about measuring. Sometimes I'll put stoppers in the bottles, or sometimes I'll just cover them up with plastic wrap and throw a rubber band on them. Sometimes we'll make the cocktails and we'll put them in bottles. It's easy to buy a capper. You can get them at Amazon or Beverage beer supply places. We'll create special labels and put them on them. Sometimes we just hand the guest the bottle. Sometimes we'll actually pour it into a glass. There are pours that are made by various companies. You can get them for a quart up to a gallon, and you just move it in volume. Now, caution, because I made this mistake and I got lucky one day. If you're going to use, and I love to use the the bottles that come from Ford's Gin, soak the labels off. ABC one day gave me a warning because we were using a bottle and we had a premixed cocktail in it, and they told me that we were violating the law because a guest could have the impression that we were serving them whatever was on the label. We talked them out of the ticket and promised never to do it again, so that's why I'm suggesting that to you. So soak the label off and away you go. Okay, let's talk about batching, some of the things that are involved with it. Tools to make it fast, efficient, and smooth, and kind of keep the waste down, all right? So mise en place, if you've been around kitchens, you're familiar with this term, and it's really important. If you're not, let's talk about it just for a moment, because mise en place, it's the process of getting things prepared and organized, because this is a production issue. This has a lot of creativity to it, but there's some discipline and protocol that needs to be followed. In short, everything has a place and you need to follow this protocol. And mise en place, as like Bourdain said, it's our religion. Even though the chefs talk about it all the time, it's one of these things that we can drag over into our bar service, and you should. Okay. Do not disturb. When you are making cocktails in batches, you need to warn people not to interrupt you. I hear more horror stories and mistakes about things not tasting right because an ingredient, too much was added, not enough, something's off because they were interrupted by a phone call, somebody asking a question. Just say, listen, we're making cocktails. Unless the building's on fire, don't disturb us. Just wait till the end, write it down, okay? My other caution is that you limit your batching. If we have to make cocktails for 1,000 people, do it in batches of 200. Seasonal citruses and sometimes mixes that come from manufacturers, purveyors that we're using, they taste differently and it can affect. So sometimes something is so off that instead of dumping 1,000, we only have to dump or doctor up and adjust 200. And we've all seen this with limes, oranges, grapefruit. So, okay. So getting creative. Sometimes I will just sketch out with my staff and there's things that will influence of what the cocktail is going to be. In this particular case, this is for a wedding. When I found out the bride, she happened to have grown up in Seal Beach, and Seal Beach was a famous place for rum runners to hang out, and her grandfather was a rum runner. So we created this drink, and we put the details of the Collins glass, and in the center, the ice is actually ice and solid and mangoes. It adds some color. It adds a chilling, and it adds some additional contact. The rest of the components are there. We sketch it out. But for today, to help us, I'm going to work with something simple that we're all aware of, which is a cosmopolitan. And you pick a recipe. Now, there's all kinds of databases out there, and many of us have modified to our own taste. But get a recipe, stick with it so that you can be consistent and reproduce it over and over again. So here's your basic cosmopolitan recipe. We also have a picture of what it's going to look like. Stephen Covey is oftentimes fond of saying, begin with the end in mind. Okay, Excel. Excel is our friend. Be comfortable, get used to working with Excel. If not, find somebody to help teach you the basic skills. We're going to talk about those now. Kitchen conversions, quarts, ounces, and so forth. You need a calculator. I have some charts, a lot of charts available so I can look at things. Sometimes I have to work in metric if I'm doing work in Canada or in Europe or in Asia. So we just do everything in metric. Sometimes some kitchens, some bars, they want to do everything by weight. So we take into consideration the tar weight. The tar weight is the weight of the individual container that is being measured, and then we go from there. So have your conversion charts. There are charts available online in Google, but also have them written down, and then check your conversions. Okay, So here's an example. We took the recipe for the Cosmopolitan and we've put it in here. And the columns are the elements. What are the components? I number those so I know how many things. This is part of my mise en place, so I can count and say, I have 6 containers, all right? And then each one, I have the vodka, my triple sec, my juice, my cranberry juice, I have my fresh lime juice, I have my water, we'll talk about dilution more, and my lime wheel. You see a little note down there at the bottom, which is kosher salt. I like to add a little kosher salt in my large volumes to help. I've had some people from time to time comment and go, oh, it's a big cocktail, it's a batch, it probably doesn't taste very good. And giving a little bit of salt helps heighten things and makes it taste better. Now, you also notice I put the quantity. In this case, it's 2, and then the units, ounces, and then how many. And I put the star above it because you can adjust it. Sometimes I'm making this for 50, sometimes I'm making it for 200, whatever it is. You can adjust the functions, and it's automatically built in there. And then same thing for, you'll see it says 750 ml. This is my bottle designation. And I sometimes will change this, and I'll show you an example. So if I'm ordering 750 milliliter bottles, I know that I need 7.55. So I've made a note off to the side that I'm going to order 8 750 milliliter bottles. I know what I need, so I don't over order, okay? And I don't under order, okay? I need triple sec. I need 2 750 milliliter bottles. It's perfect, no waste there. Now when I get to the cranberry juice, based on if I'm getting my cranberry juice in 25, 32, 64, 128 ounce containers, I'm going to adjust my function and it'll tell me how many of those. Lime juice, for example, I need 50 ounces at the minimum, but the acidity and to get that right balance, I might have to add more. So I'm going to budget here and say 64 ounces. Water, we'll talk about that. I've budgeted a 1/4 ounce because in this case, we're going to dilute the cocktail, chill it, and not add any ice back in. So we're going to take advantage, do that in advance. And then on lime wheels, I got 103 pieces. I like to have just a couple extras. I've refined how we cut things so that we don't have a lot of waste. And it saves on labor and it saves on waste in the long run. So once this is built, then we build our order list also. We do that in Excel. So we know exactly what we need and we can delegate this and say to someone new on our staff or somebody like, go get all these items and bring them in and let's start assembling the cocktail. Some things that we're going to need. Number 1, a trash can with liner on wheels. And this is important because we don't let our scraps and things accumulate on the table or work surfaces. They go right into the trash can as we're done using each item. We've all heard the term ABC, always be cleaning, okay? Now, I caution you if you're doing large volumes not to overfill your trash cans because then nobody can empty them and then it just becomes a waste. If I'm working with new people and I'm not sure about their cutting, their skills for preparing the fruit and so forth, I will have them place the cut items into insert pans so that I can take a look because oftentimes they're not cutting properly. They're using not enough of the fruit or too much of the fruit, like a watermelon's too much rind, sometimes with pineapples. So we'll take a look at that. Okay, sometimes I don't have the space, and so I will get banquet tables, and I'll put them on leg extensions, and I'll put this note off to the side. I put them on leg extensions so that we can raise them up. Sometimes I can't work in the kitchen, I can't work in behind the regular bar, so I'll go out and just claim a space. I like to have a stainless steel working table if I have my choice, and I like it with locking wheels so that I can move it around. I like to be mobile. You need your sanitation buckets and the leg extensions, which are just PVC pipe that's cut. I like to add the colors so I can identify. I have several hundred of these made up because sometimes when I go out to events, there's 20, 30 tables, and the leg extensions are just ready to pop on. It saves your back. You'll love them, okay? Some of the other tools are cutting boards. Lots of kitchens follow protocol and they'll use, because we're mostly just cutting fruit, unless you're occasionally adding proteins to your cocktails. But use a green cutting board, and then you need a chef's knife, you need a paring knife. I like the Murphy bar knife so you don't stab yourself. Bird's beak sometimes for peeling and carving. Lots of bar towels and a sharpening steel. Locally in Orange County, Chef's Toys and a couple of the places are really good for sharpening knives. Your fruit won't get crushed. It's just so much cleaner, so much safer, and so much faster. And I like to have a good sharpening steel. If you're not familiar with using a steel, get some practice. Plenty of material on YouTube to help you out with that. Okay, this is the insert pan. Sometimes I use these, as I mentioned earlier, for collecting the fruit so I can take a look at it, or collecting scraps in it, or things that are cut, prepared. Scraper. So instead of using your knife to move things off the cutting board into a container, either turn the knife over and use the dull side so you don't whack up the blade, the cutting edge, and I'll use a bench scraper. Peelers, there's all kinds of peelers. Sometimes I like to use the special curved peeler the Japanese Knife Imports up in Beverly Hills has. It gets very little pith, it's really cool. And a tape dispenser with painter's tape. In this case, I have yellow tape and a Sharpie for labeling things. Don't use regular masking tape. It leaves a residue. It's hard to peel off, okay? I like the lighter color, like the yellow, because in low light conditions, it's just easier what's going on. You need a colander for washing. And then when we're getting into production, you can buy juices, and sometimes I do because it's a budget or what other constraints might be. So your broadline suppliers, your bar suppliers, oftentimes will carry Perricone or different other companies. But if I at a higher end event and I have an opportunity to go with fresh juices, I love this citrus commercial juicer. If I'm going to do things where I need ginger, carrot, cucumbers, Breville, I love their press. Whenever you run things through these machines, you need to strain them. And like I do a 2-pass strain. Before I put them in the blender, sometimes I'm putting things in the blender, but before I put them into kegs or before I mix them up too much, I'm going to run them through. I love to use a super bag. They come in various, like from 100 to 400 microns. Microns about the size of a human hair. And this strains out, like in citrus, all that cellulose, all those capillaries and so forth there. That's where the bitter elements are, and that can affect our cocktail. Same thing with our ginger and carrots and cucumber. All that pulp has bitter components. And so let's strain it out and get rid of it, okay? I like to use the large cam square lid. I like to use a 24-inch whisk and a long spoon because when I'm mixing, I want to make sure I can get down deep and get rid of the stratification. You need some plastic wrap, and now I'm hearing that the health departments throughout California are not allowing us to use the boxes anymore, particularly in this COVID circus situation. They want us to use special containers because they're claiming that the boxes, and I can see the case, see the point, possibly can hold bacteria. So you need a teaspoon. You need a teaspoon for sampling and tasting. You know, sometimes you're getting small cans, a little small swing away can opener, and sometimes you get number 10 cans. Make sure you have access to one of those. Okay, a scale. Sometimes you're weighing things in a dry fashion, and a gram scale up to a pound. Here's the super bags I was mentioning. I'm going to talk here about the Zip Zester for a moment. If you like to use a microplane, it's really good for zesting, but what do you do when you need like 5 pounds of, you know, lemon zest? The Zip Zester is a, if you can see up there on the right-hand side, you put your fruit on, turn the handle, and you'll get your components very quickly. The other cool thing is it can make some neat designs for garnishing, and you need funnels for pouring things into various bottles and containers. All right. So here's my container for mixing, my whisk. I got some measuring cups. I got a couple different sizes, 4 quart, 2 cups, 8 cups. I need a jigger for testing in small samples, and I need a spoon for tasting, okay? A couple of components I like to use is the Perfect Puree from Napa Puree. Boreon makes a nice one. Kosher salt. If I'm going to add some salt, as you do from time to time, or I'll make a solution, a saline solution, use the kosher salt. Don't use the pink Himalayan. Don't use the black. Don't use iodized, okay? All those things have flavors that will affect. The Diamond brand kosher, it really has the cleanest taste. You brought some samples and you taste them, you'll notice, okay? There's syrups. This is Max. He's from Cocktail & Sons down in New Orleans. He used to live in LA. He's got some great syrups. He will provide them in quarts and gallon sizes. And then if I'm doing shrubs, over here this is called a flavor reactor on the right-hand side. It uses ultrasonics. So I can do infusions in 20 minutes instead of 3 days. I can do like a ½ gallon at a time. So actually a gallon, 2 half-gallon containers. All right. So this is a picture of Jiro Ono. If you haven't seen the film, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I would encourage you to watch it. It's a great film on hospitality. It's not a film about making sushi. It's sort of the background. And he has a quote in there. He says that in order for one to taste good, one must taste good. So I want to remind us that constantly you need to be testing and tasting, because things, they can vary from time to time, and you're going to have to make some alterations to get that good balance, that clean, crisp flavor that you want. Now, sometimes I use a service mat for pouring things out, but I learned over time it's better off, particularly in volumes, to go with a sheet pan and cooling racks. You'll find these in the kitchen. Sometimes, in this case, this is a half sheet pan and a half sheet pan cooling rack. You can get full sizes. And I'll line up my glasses. And what I mean by lean is that I start at one end and I work across. So for example, the glasses will have the ice put in them first. That's to help chill it so my cocktail doesn't get warm. And then I'll come back and I'll add in the straw. And then I'll come back in and add the garnish. And we'll do that in a procession. Now let's talk about some considerations here, which is dilution. Because oftentimes we're making a batch cocktail, we may, and then we may not put ice into it. So if we're not putting ice into it, we need to add the water so that it's chilled in advance, so that it tastes good and it's cold. If we're going to put the ice in at the last minute, then that's fine. We might be using a cube, and I've put a couple examples on cubes here. There's different size cubes, and that can affect it. Sometimes I get lasered. This is from a Lexus dealership opening up. Sometimes I get fun creative by adding fruit or herbs into the cubes. If I'm going to add water, I'm going to use a good quality water, bottled water, unless you have a good purification system. And sometimes I'm going to add foam so that I can put goodies on, like logos and so forth. So I've listed in some resources, because oftentimes people are like, gee, where do you get this or where do you get that? So Modernist Pantry is where I get the super bag. They have a lot of other cool things there. Kona, which is a company out of New Orleans, Louisiana, they also have a lot of cool bar stuff. You have to dig down in the site. They have a lot of things that can be used for spirification. Dress the Drink is my favorite place up in Las Vegas. They will ship to you. They have dried fruits, vegetables, a lot of cool things for rimming. Fresh Origins, which is down in San Marcos, and you can order through most broad lines, has the microgreens. They have some really cool things like straws that are made out of pineapple or apples. And you can get some other like mini basil, which is really great in like a Bloody Mary. The Sanctuary has some very cool stuff. You got to dig down into their site. And one of the things I would encourage you when you're looking at, a lot of this stuff is sort of driven for chefs, and use your lateral thinking. Say like, well, how can we apply this in a bar application? You'll find some great opportunities. Oftentimes in large volumes, particularly now in a COVID situation, people don't want to use glass, or maybe we're around a pool and so they want something disposable. So Tossware, which is located here in Southern California, has some great items. You can order from them, and they'll even do branding or particular names. This is a nice upsell opportunity. And then for the InstaFoam and where to get the flavor reactor, their link is down there at the bottom. So, okay. So I want to say thank you. If you have questions, if we have time and Tony wants to go over those, we'll do that. Otherwise, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. I'll answer back to you. I have a new blog that was just launched. It deals with catering. There's not much posted right there on cocktails yet, but there will be in time. Give it a read, give it a subscribe, and then you'll see some material. So Tony, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. That was great. If anybody has any questions, you can just unmute yourself, I believe. And does anybody have any questions at all?
I had one question.
Go.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
go ahead.
So that is, I was looking at the strainer bags. That's something I haven't seen before. And you talk about how the pulp or whatever it is that strains out can affect the flavor of the drink. Do you find that the pulp also affects the usability of the corny kegs?
Yeah,
Like
good point. Yeah, let me mention two things. Before you ever put anything in a Cornelius keg, strain it through a super bag. Not even, the what they call the coolie or the china cap, any of those, you got to use the super bag. And the reason is that two things. One, oftentimes there's pectin in these, the citrus or the fruits that we're using, and
Okay.
it becomes a coagulant, and it will jam up your valves and so forth. It'll make a mess. Plus, it has those bitter notes, so it'll alter the flavor of things. When I was doing some work, I was doing the production runs for the Golden State of Cocktails, and I had to make 5 gallons of a ginger syrup for a presentation for somebody. And we made it the day before, chilled it, and when they came in the morning, we noticed at the very bottom of the container this white powder, and it had filtered out all but the very smallest of sugar that had not dissolved and some of the components of the ginger. And it was a really clean taste. The master bartender who was teaching this said, "Gee, this is like the cleanest, ginger syrup I've ever had." And we discussed that unfortunately they had not scraped the skin off their ginger when they did it, and we did, because it's just bitter. So yeah, get the super bags. Best place, Modernist Pantry.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just as a reminder, Troy's unable to share his, something's wrong with his video, so we're not able to see his face. That's why we're not able to see him speak, so this is why we have his demo on the screen. So apologize for that. Do we have any other questions? Please jump in. Just unmute yourself and go for it.
Hi, Roy. This is Jim Calkins. I wanted
Hey,
to say, well, one, it was a great presentation, and secondly, a question I have would be, with regards to the Cornelius kegs, if I'm going to be doing a, let's say, an old-fashioned and batching it into a Cornelius keg, how does the carbonation affect the actual end user result on the cocktail?
Well, if you're good question, and I appreciate your kind words. One, the carbonation dissipates very quickly when using the right gases. Sometimes people use nitrogen, and you should be using CO2 so you don't get any aftertaste. I've made that mistake myself, even using the small canister. So make sure you're using CO2. And I've never, when I do that, I haven't had that problem. One caution I would have for you is sometimes when we're batching in these large volumes, and I had this happen at an event, the people sponsoring the event insisted that we use up everything and make it all. And I said, what if we don't serve 300 old fashions? And they go, make it. Okay, it's your product, go ahead. And when it came to the end, we only served about 300, and I had literally 200 old fashions left over. So, kind of gauge that. And then sometimes when I'm doing old fashions, if it's not too large a party, I will make the mix up, and I'll save my bourbon at the end and just add that at the last moment, because so I don't have any oxidation or deterioration of the cocktail. Bourbon being the most expensive, or rye being the most expensive component, it's the last item added.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Oh, and as a heads up, I've done the batch cocktails with the liter bottles, as you've suggested in the past. And I did have extra, and I ended up freezing it. And the freezing process actually did help it with the flavor profile and kept it for a couple months.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I hate to waste cocktails.